Let me start off by saying that this is not going to be a book review. If you're looking for a book review, there are plenty of reviews here on YouTube and on book blogs and in scholarly journals, so this is not the place. I'm just here to talk about my singular, unpopular opinion concerning the book Lolita. And that opinion is that this book is overhyped. One of my concerns going into this book was whether or not the violence would be considered gratuitous, because I think it's so hard for books to portray violence, particularly sexual violence, in a way that isn't, in a way that shows respect to the victim, and in a way that isn't titillating. Now, the way that this book works, the way that Lolita enraptures you, is by casting a spell over you. It attempts to lull you into complacency by the protagonist's diction and by the melodic words that he chooses to portray his actions with. Now, if you aren't being astute, it's easy to fall into the trap of rooting for Humbert and for rooting for the protagonist and for rooting for his actions. Now, and in the words of Better Than Food book reviews, you find yourself wanting for him to be successful in his mission, which, as he says, what does that mean? It means you wanted to bang her. Now, I never found myself cast under that spell, and I don't know if it's just because, as in the words of my friend Amy from the Dusty Bookshelf, I have a more sound moral compass, which I highly doubt that is, because no one has ever accused me of that, or if it's just because I have, gone through a traumatic experience, or what, because I never found myself indulging Humbert, and the entire time I was completely disgusted by his actions. I will say that yes, the words and his choice of diction is incredibly beautiful, but I don't think that that's enough to save this novel. I think that using beautiful words to describe terrible actions is akin to casting pearls before swine, or lipstick on a pig. It doesn't salvage this book. And I will say that I was disappointed, not because I hated his actions and because I think that books that describe terrible things shouldn't exist, because I think that there is a way to portray violence I think that there is a way to portray violence well, and but you have to do it with respect, and you have to do it with gravitas, and I don't think that this book does that. The whole point of Lolita is to shock you, and that almost feels cheap to me. Using beautiful words to describe terrible actions isn't that difficult. If I wrote a book and it was from the perspective of the terrorists who committed 9/11, and I just wrote from their first-person perspective, and I used beautiful words, would that be considered a bestseller? It's not that difficult to shock people by talking about taboo topics, or by trying to get you to sympathize with a unsympathetic character. So that's my problem with this book. It doesn't say anything. It doesn't say anything other than look at me. It doesn't cast any light into why Humbert is doing this. It doesn't make any literary comparisons. It doesn't say anything unique about the human spirit. It doesn't have any grandiose symbolism or themes. The whole point is just to shock you, and that, in a way, to me, feels exploitive, because using someone's tragedy, even if that person is a hypothetical person or is a character in a story doesn't feel right, because there are thousands of Lolitas, or as I prefer to call them, Dolores, because that's her real name. There are thousands of Doloreses all over this country and all over this world, people who this really happened to. And so using their tragedies to make a statement, and the statement being that you can shock people, feels wrong. Because you're using their tragedy just as a point, and not even for a point to make a statement about the overarching state of humanity or about how depraved we are or anything. The whole point is just to be a train wreck that you can't look away from, and that just feels wrong to me. And so I was reading this book, and I was having to put it down every couple of pages because I found it so disgusting and revolting, and it was taking me back to a very dark place. And I kept wondering, what is the point of this? And it's not even because I've read that Nabokov didn't believe that literature was supposed to have a greater point, or he didn't believe that literature needed to have a bigger point. So his books, and even though I've only read Lolita, I haven't read Pale Fire or any of his other works, so his books don't contain broader perspectives. His books don't contain allegories about humanity or greater philosophical points, which is what I look for in literature, which is why I found this book so disappointing. Because if you are going to, in a sense, take someone's story, and that story does belong to them, because to all the Doloreses of the world, their tragedy belongs to them, and if you are going to take that story from them and not even use that to shed some light on why these situations occur, or on the terrible dark underbelly of humanity, or on anything, and if all you're going to do is use their story for the sake of seeing if you can get people to sympathize with their with the aggressor, that is a gross abuse of these tragedies, in my humble opinion. And clearly, I'm in the minority here, because Lolita has thousands upon thousands of positive reviews, and people adore this book. But as I was reading it, I talked to some of my friends, and apparently I'm not the only person who feels this way. And I don't know if it's because of the Me Too movement, or if it's because some of us have had like dark things happen to us, or what. But a lot of us couldn't sympathize with Humbert, and a lot of us couldn't read this book without being taken back to a dark place. And a lot of us couldn't read this book without feeling disgust at the fact that it even existed. Because I'm not saying that people who commit terrible crimes aren't worthy of sympathy, or aren't worthy of being given basic humanity, because I don't. But I'm saying that taking a story that belongs to a victim and seeing if you can flip it on its head and turn the victim into the aggressor and the seductress, and turn the perpetrator and turn the rapist into a victim of circumstance, isn't literary. It's just shock value. And I've said this and I know I'm repeating myself and I'm being redundant, but it almost feels cheap to me to simply see if you can shock someone and not say anything in the process. You're not using this platform to you're not using this platform for a greater purpose. You're just using it to take away the voice of the victim. And that feels wrong. So I was very disappointed in Lolita. Ultimately, I gave it 2 out of 5 stars, mostly just because I was very impressed by the word choices that Nabokov used, which, despite the fact that English was like his 5th language or something. Although I will say that it's unnecessarily verbose. There was something that I saw in a TV show once, and I know that this is a common saying, and it's never use a $5 word when a 5-cent word will do. And that phrase was constantly coming back to my mind when I was reading Lolita, because it was just $5 word, $5 word, $5 word, $20 word, and I would look up words in the dictionary. I would be constantly looking up words in the dictionary as I was reading, because I would have no idea what they meant, and then sometimes the dictionary would say that the word meant something different than the way that Nabokov was using it. So he was reinventing the language. And I will say that if you enjoyed Lolita, great for you. But if you're like me and you didn't, that's totally fine. You're not a bad reader. You're not a bad student of literature. It's totally acceptable to not enjoy reading a book where a child molester rapes a 12-year-old girl. You're fine. You are not any less smart because you didn't enjoy this book, and you're not any less literary or any less sophisticated because you were unable to stomach this story. That's all I have to say. Leave a comment if you have any thoughts on my video here today. I'd love to hear from you all. I know that I'm probably gonna get some angry comments because people love this book, but hey, if you hated the book like me, let me know. And I will see you all next time. Bye.